please. Which is lease of reserve land.
Telenga o mātua whānau.
Thank you. How did you know you had to say that for me?
Look, this is just a straightforward procedural matter. We're just seeking final ratification for the approval of this lease. It's already been before council. We had to publicly advertise it. No objections received. And so we're just seeking final ratification, and it, I guess, puts to bed a matter that's been around for 20 years and just formalises an encroachment that's been there for 20 years.
Happy to move it.
Second it.
Would you like to speak on it?
Well, as the officer has said, we've actually had this before us before. This is actually tidying it up and putting it to bed, as you say, and I think it's very timely and happy to move it.
Any other comments? All those in favour of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Wow.
More simple than water.
Project updates, James. There you go.
Kia ora, good morning. I guess my paper will fit somewhere in between the first one and the second one for timeliness. So this is an information paper to discuss or to inform you of the current state of our set of projects that we are delivering. Within the body of the paper, the main headline is there is a significant increasing quantum of projects that are being delivered at council, which is a really positive thing to be able to say. Just following on from Kath's comments in the first paper, you know, there is a lot of this work focusing in the Three Waters area. As you can see in the background under, there is 290 projects in the Three Waters area that we are starting off on in that initiate phase. And the bulk of the work is being delivered within the Infrastructure Directorate. As with any program of work, there's always a steep initial curve and a learning curve, and the spend generally does follow with the initiation of new projects. So I've highlighted that for this year's delivery, our financial spend is actually behind. However, over time, and when I mean time, I'm talking a series of years, that will improve, which is to be expected as well. Some of the notable projects of recent that we have finished as a council and that our community can enjoy, for example, the BMS system at the Municipal Theatre, in an essence that provides our customers with a more comfortable environment when they're sitting in the theatre and enjoying productions and presentations and seeing our children do dance. So that will provide a more temperate environment. Prior to that, the controlling of the temperature within the theatre was quite a struggle. So that's a quick win that we've achieved. Also, our Kennedy Park ablution block is now up and running. And you will see out towards Thames Pandora, we're well underway with a new road safety intersection improvement for Thames Pandora roundabout. You'll also note that we have some, I've identified some of the specific projects where we have some challenges. With every project there is always challenges as we go through the process. So just to talk to a couple of the items that we have noted previously were had a concern for either the financial side of things, the budget, or the timing, which we've referred to as the schedule. The Mariwa shops, there will be a paper coming back to council to seek a direction on how we progress that project. At the moment, the delivery of that project and the design within that has exceeded the anticipated budget. So we'll be coming back to talk to what are the options with that and what is the preference to take that forward. Also, some of the other roading projects, the Priority Road project that we've put on hold, and the Puketitri Road project, which is both red, features in the new LTP and is staged over years 2, 4, 6 and 8. So again, it's subject to. Apart from that, that's really a précis of where we're at with the 52 projects that we've commented on, and happy to take any questions further.
Councillor Taylor.
Just one brief question, because I just generally focus on the red ones.
Yes?
Is the sauna and steam room, there was mention that the tender would go out in the first quarter of this year. Has that actually occurred?
That hasn't occurred just yet, but we are working with a very limited market for that particular project, and also the supply of the materials has been a challenge through COVID, but I envisage it will go out within the next 6 to 8 weeks at the latest.
Thank you.
That's at Ocean Spa.
Yeah.
Yeah. Councillor Tapani.
Thank you. Through you, Mr Chair. Kia ora, James.
Kia ora.
The third item down, could you just clarify for me, Conference Centre Oda Hinuera, is that at the Kennedy Park complex, that conference centre?
No. So the name of the project, we don't change once it's established. That's the Hinuera Stone up on the facility on the waterfront.
Ah, okay. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Brosnan.
Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Just a question around the airport sewer pump. The reason for that scope expanding so much, was that foreseeable?
It's difficult to say. I think within reason, we should always, we should always expect scope change and respond to that maturely. We shouldn't try to keep the budgets or the scope to a budget. Hence, we'll bring papers back to council if we need to. But I think in this particular situation, the team have genuinely discovered some items that they didn't know about to begin with.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Do I have a mover that we receive this report, please? Councillor Mawson, seconded Councillor Crystal. Is there any? No? All those in favour, please say aye. Sorry?
I was just going to speak to it briefly.
Oh, sorry.
It's through the chair. I know we spend a lot of time on our number one priorities, the three waters, but it's good to see some progress being made for the kids of our city as well. And I think I see on here the Roberts Terrace playground. If anyone's ever been past that playground, it has been a sad excuse for our city for a very long time. And playgrounds have gone up all around our town, and this area have missed out for a very long time. So I'm very happy to see this on our list when I put my child-friendly portfolio lens across it. So well done. Has taken a while though.
Thank you. No other comments? So all of those in favour of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you, James.
Thank you.
Item 4, project update Pandora Industrial Wastewater, and we've got Anna, please. Just don't want to take this away from you, Hannah, but Cameron couldn't be here today, so we've got the number one person.
Kia ora tātou. Thank you for the compliment. Just want to clarify, it's not about the wastewater, the Pandora wastewater, that is quite separate. So I'll just be talking about the Pandora Sediment Quality Assessment and the Thames and Tyne waterways. So this project started, it was actually like many projects listed in the Ahuriri Master Plan. It comes under Project 1F, I think it's called, and there's a budget of 1.25 million approximately for this work to be undertaken. The first stage of this work, as our team, we were relatively confident in the knowledge of the general quality of the water of the Thames and Tyne waterways. What we didn't know, and we realised there was quite a big gap in, is the quality of the sediment in those waterways. And that is quite a pressing issue, because when we get floodwaters, there's erosion in sediment. and particularly in the Thames and Tyne network, there is a very quick route to Ahuru estuary. So we really wanted to know what was occurring at depth in the Thames and Tyne waterways, so we could fully be prepared to go into an options assessment on what the best, what we could put forward as our best foot in terms of rehabilitating these waterways themselves. So I just want to bring up a couple of key points. The project has taken on an approach of collecting sediment core samples. Won't go into the nitty-gritty of it. It's a bit over and above some people.
Gritty.
Yeah, I tried there. I wondered if someone was going to pick that up. The process involves basically drilling an aluminium barrel into sediment and pulling up what you can. We've sort of aimed for that top metre and assessing it for grain size, visual analyses, which includes, I suppose, dramatic changes in grain size, which is quite interesting. We've actually found the Napier earthquake as evidence in these waterways, which was quite cool. From there, the sediment is split off and goes to Hill laboratories for pesticide and hydrocarbon analysis. And the current stage of the remaining sediment analysis is that it's down in Otago University, where they essentially put a very high-tech X-ray across the whole surface of it and scan it for concentrations of metals. So we're awaiting that data at the moment. What we hope that will tell us is, well, at least give us guidance on the current state of the sediment, and that will hopefully allow us to investigate options such as dredging, which is pretty much why we're doing this. We wouldn't want to disturb anything at depth that we don't want to accidentally release to the estuary. That would be no good, obviously. And yeah, just really to investigate further options on progressing the Thames and Tyne waterways and encouraging them as ecologically valuable extensions to Ahuru estuary. Whereas at the moment they're largely just drainage channels that people walk over and try not to look too hard at. Once we get the data, we will be reviewing some of it in-house, but the main expertise some expertise will be engaged that have undertaken similar projects like harbour remediation. And there are a few of those in New Zealand that have been undertaken successfully in the last decade or so. So we will be seeking independent advice on what some of the data is actually saying and where we can progress that from there. Just a brief summary, happy to take questions.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. I might call you Dr. Ludlow. Just a question, and I think this is really exciting. I learned a new term, vibrocoring. But this is great that we're getting this work underway. One of the questions that I have is that the recommendations note or ask us to note the implications of this work, yet the paper doesn't seem to clearly identify any implications for us. And I just wonder if you wouldn't mind clarifying what is intended there.
Yep, I suppose I could have worded it a bit better, but the implications in that once we understand the quality of the sediment in the waterways, we're quite confident we know how, we will then know the holistic quality of the whole system. And from there we can take appropriate steps to ensure that we've minimised the risk of, rushing into any options that might be inappropriate, given that sediment quality. The idea being that we need to do something in that system to try and improve it, and we can't just leave it.
Just following on from that, could you kind of explain to us how that decision point happens? So you get the results, there's obviously some implications in the way that we deal with the remediation of the waterways. How do you make that decision? Is that something that you would need to seek further funding for and council would see through a program of work, or how would that look?
Just the next stage, I'm familiar with the next stage being the engagement of an independent expert. I don't know too much further past that. I might call on John to help out with that, throw him in the deep end. Another one there.
It's a pretty shallow channel there, so I think we'll be all right unless the mud's really deep. But it really just depends on what the expert advice comes up with and putting cost estimates around those options. It may be that the evidence that Hannah's referring to only gives us one option. but at some point we'll look to report back to council with the next stages of work, what that's telling us, the options that we've considered, and where that's landing us. And if there's a budget implication, we'll wrap that up in that as well.
Thank you.
Would it be correct to say you really want to see it come back to council?
No, well, I was just interested in what the implications were for council before I obviously accept them. Want to know what those are.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think that's a really valid point. It's probably also worth noting that there's pretty unique work across New Zealand. The team have done exceptionally well to get it this far, and I think it's a pretty exciting opportunity for Napier City Council and our community.
Councillor Tapani.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. I've got a couple. So the first one I think is just a matter of, might be a grammatical error. In the beginning of the paper, it refers to 70 millimetres. Core samples down to 70 millimetres, but then on the next page it talks about 45 to 70 centimetres. So is that just a clerical error?
No, I can provide a bit of clarity around that. I think what you're referring to just on page 2, so we have undertaken quite a bit of superficial sediment quality monitoring. Is that what you're referring to?
Yep.
And that's through our resource consent process, where we're required by consent to collect superficial sediment samples, and they are only 2 millimetres, which, when you consider the sediment accretion rates are like 5 millimetres a year, that only covers the last 4 years or so. On the following page, it sort of discusses where the key area of interest is, from memory, just to remind myself. That following page is just talking about where previous research has found the Napier earthquake, and from our visual analyses of these core samples, that's the area where we have found that too, which is quite exciting.
So just to make sure I understood that last sentence, so you've got some historical cores which you found some information on, and you've got the current work that you're doing, and there's a connection around that data, particularly around the 1931.
Yes, so Napier City Council didn't do the first sampling. It's a reference to a paper by Niwa, and that was, I think, maybe a PhD thesis from someone about 20 years ago who did that work, but they didn't do as much quality work as we are after, nor did they go into the Thames and Tyne network. So it's just a bit of specifying that.
Cool, because that was my first question, whether or not the sampling depths provided us with a time frame that we could look at. By extension, are we able to establish what would have been the baseline prior to 1931, based on those core samples?
Yes, yeah.
Very cool. And the last question I have for you is, well, it's not a question so much, but just, well, I suppose it is. Discharge of, if we're looking eventually to dredge those heavy metals and that sediment out of that area, by way of some of the, currently that conversation is happening around the Clive for Hawke's Bay Regional Council, and the biggest challenge they're finding is where to put the sediment. So I just want to flag that to the team, that some considered thought might be needed to put into that place around, great that we're working towards this, but we might be creating a new task that we're going to have an issue with dealing with. So just signaling to the team, put some thought in that space.
Yep, absolutely.
Deputy Mayor, you have another question?
No, I was just signalling I was happy to move the recommendation.
Oh, okay. Okay, do I have a seconder then, please? Councillor Crown, speak on.
Yeah, thank you. I think this is a really exciting piece of work. There were two kind of key things that I pulled out of the report that are particularly pertinent that I wanted to highlight, and that is that already, even though we haven't had the laboratory results back, we know that the fine-grained settlements that we're finding are restrictive of biodiversity. So that's a key finding. And we also know from the fossils that we've found that there has been a radical and gradual decline in the quality of sediments that are going into that waterway over decades. So those are two key findings for us that I think really highlight the importance of the work, and I congratulate your team on it.
Councillor Crown, do you want to speak now?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, absolutely support the comments made by Deputy Mayor Brosnan. I found the paper so incredibly interesting, and and it's great for us to be a part of this work. It was just a really good reminder for me, and I'm sure for anyone who would take the time to have a look through and understand what it means for us, is that, you know, our waterways are so connected. We're all connected, the water, the land, everything, the animals, the life that it gives to those creatures, and yeah, it's such an important piece of work, so yeah, happy to support.
Thank you. Any other comments? All those in favour of the recommendation, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Thank you. Are you a doctor yet?
Not quite.
Not quite.
Many years later.
He's looking for a psychologist.
Item 5, curbside refuge wheelie bins, Rhett, please. Thank you, Rich.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's afternoon by now. I hope in amongst all the reports and the big pile of paper, probably digital, you've had a bit of time to look at this small report. It is one that seeks approval to establish a fee for a replacement wheelie bin. So we supply wheelie bins to all the residents or all the households in Napier. And we've had a big rollout for sort of that first go at that. Then obviously there are subdivisions happening or people that were for some reason excluded in that first rollout, where we supply a bin free of charge as part of the services we provide. But then there are also bins that are broken, stolen, sometimes people damage the bins. We've had people drill out the chip. We've had people spray painting them black because they probably feel that for some reason that suits the house better. So we've got some instances where we need to replace bins. So thus far we've done that for free and basically make a quick turnaround so people are not without a service. But we are proposing a charge for a wheelie bin, which is based on the cost of the wheelie bin and the associated cost at the contractor side, and then plus a little bit of our admin to do the checks and balances to make sure it's okay to do so, and then GST. So the cost for replacing a wheelie bin is set at $85. That really is one part of this paper. The second one is that we've had a few queries from parties that would like an additional bin, and our goal with the waste minimisation plan has been to provide people a volume that is suitable for most of the people most of the time, but we have had some instances where there are not-for-profits in a situation where they have a very valid reason to have an additional need, and we propose for those not-for-profits to supply an extra bin. It is paid for, but it is outside of the normal rules where people cannot have a second receptacle. So yeah, that really is what this report is about. The numbers are at the moment not large, but we do have people that take bins when they vacate a rental property. They take it with them to another town. So we've had some turn up in Hastings as well. So this is really to cover this off. I'm happy to answer any questions in regards to this paper.
Do you have any questions? Councillor Bogue.
Thank you, Rhett. I'm a bit concerned. Like last Friday, I put my rubbish bin out, and when I went to pick it up Friday night, it wasn't there. So I was going to knock on the doors in my lane, but anyway, it turned up the next day. Somebody just put it back in my drive. But what concerns me is that what happens if a ratepayer or a tenant decides they can't afford the $85? It's quite a significant amount of money. The implication in the wording is that in order to encourage residents to place a value on this service and to ensure their council-owned wheelie bin is looked after in a suitable manner, it's like blaming a person whose wheelie bin might have been run over, it might have been set alight, it might have been taken, stolen, or it's just gone missing. So there are lots of instances, I think, where it's unfortunate that somebody's wheelie bin goes missing or something happens to it, and it's not the fault of the person that we're going to be asked to pay for it. So I don't know what the answer is, but it just concerns me that what would happen if somebody, say a tenant, can't afford the $85 and their landlord's not prepared to pay it, so they can't afford it? Do the landlord's rates get reduced, or that subsidy comes in, or where's their rubbish going to go? You know, I'm just a bit concerned about charging such a large amount of money for something which is going to be quite prohibitive for some of our residents, for no fault of their own.
No. I don't know. Oh, don't need to push the button. That's a very valid point. It's one we as a team actually struggle with. So the paper isn't really aiming at putting the blame on anyone in those kind of situations. The contract allows for a certain amount of wheelie bins that we really only estimated at the beginning to be replaced or to be put towards new builds. We could look at those numbers and say if we stay under those budgeted numbers, we can do what we have done, which is provide them for free. What we don't want to do is make the bins very easy to replace and have no barrier in that sense. We do have property managers that say, hey, the bin's gone, can we have another one? And we thought about maybe subsidizing half of the cost. We try to help the community in the sense that we have assisted services. We sometimes, for difficult properties, try to help people. We personally also struggle to have to tell people what the cost will be, but to not have the ability to charge something is probably also not a place where we would want to be. I could do work on estimation on how much cost it would be if we manage it, but make, for example, the first reissue free. But that, it will result in a cost. The wheelie bins themselves are about $50, and we do not have a large stock of sort of second-hand ones that have come around that you could supply for a lower fee. We could introduce a policy or a panel that review specific situations for people that cannot afford it. The last thing we want to do is to say to people, you can't have this service. That's absolutely, that's a place we don't want to be.
Okay.
So we've done 35, probably about 40 in this first quarter. Oh, no, that's the total we've actually done. So we're well under the 500 we estimated. I mean, if I get feedback that says we would like to go up to that contract estimate and rethink it, I'd be more than happy with that.
Councillor Topping.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question was actually pretty much the same, but I haven't quite got the answer out of your response that I was hoping for. Or maybe I did. So I would ask the same question in a slightly different way. So I do think that the current wording doesn't enable our staff to be able to work with flexibility. So what I would like to hear from the team is how do we enable our staff to provide for a case-by-case assessment? Because as Councillor Bogue points out, while it's not the intention of the paper, it does allude to a punitive approach towards those who are victims of others' activities for the most part. So what I'm looking for from you in your response is where is the flexibility for our staff to deal with a case-by-case, and you can come back to us if you don't have those answers today, where is the flexibility for a case-by-case approach to building solutions with our residents? It is about changing behaviour and providing solutions in the long term, so we don't want to degrade that relationship with our residents. And the second thing is, are there any options? Those of us on really limited incomes, that is a huge chunk out of a weekly budget, and so are we able to work with them to fold that into some sort of overtime service for our residents, because they're ultimately having to pick up the cost for somebody else's activity. And so the more we can keep people on the kaupapa and move towards a waste-free future, the better that is for us. And I would love to see how our staff are empowered to do that.
Thank you, Api. We are, in the beginning of April, going to meet with Kiangaora, who have relatively small units where one is vacated at a certain point. It's quite easy for bins to be unattended for a while, and they don't necessarily are taken to a new address somewhere else, but they move within the complex. Sometimes people use two. Other people get upset, and there are certain things happening with those receptacles because of course it provides volume for waste that people have. So we hope to come to a solution with them as well, and maybe this paper really indicates the cost of the bin, but not provides the ultimate flexible solution when it comes to a personal situation. That is really quite tricky. So far for us, we've been able to help everybody without cost, but. Yeah, we are aware of the fact that that there's a limit within the budgeted contract amount, but we could look at that. So far, we've not gone over that either, including new builds. But if a big development is starting, you would eat into your bin stock when there's a subdivision.
Right, Deputy Mayor Brosnan, then Councillor McGrath, then Councillor Simpson.
I actually have a question about point B, but I'll just start with the conversation that's been ongoing. I don't have an issue with the recommendation in point A. I think with any fees and charges, there's always discretion of staff if there's a particular hardship issue for them to use discretion. So I don't have an issue with that. I think I agree that there needs to be a barrier so that it's not something that people use frequently, like you gave the example of property managers, because it's easy. There does need to be a barrier, so I'm supportive of your recommendation. I'm not so supportive of B, to be honest, around providing an additional receptacle to certain agencies. A, because I know that's a really big step change from the baseline we've set with everyone else, and B, because our service that we all collectively subsidise for everyone else, there's a level of that we all pay a similar amount, is for the residential waste. We're provided the same capacity as what we always have, and so I struggle with anyone who's running a business, whether it be a not-for-profit or not, from home. They would have always needed to pay for additional waste collection because we never provided more than 120 litres, and so I struggle with the community subsidising individual businesses, like I say, whether they're not-for-profits or charities, when there's always been operational costs involved in running those from home, and we haven't changed anything. So I'm struggling why we would do that now.
Thank you, Annette. The additional bin would at twice the rate, so that in that sense the cost is covered, but it is something we do not provide to others in residential properties. We do have, of course, the CBD areas where we have 2, 3 or 4 collections a week.
Have you costed that with the supplier, and it is no additional cost if we charge it out at double the rate?
So for an additional wheelie bin, it would be a second click of just the normal rate, and of course the supply of the wheelie bin over the period. So the actual bin itself. So the rate would be twice for the property, as if there were a granny flat or a second unit, and it would be bin 2 of 2. And the cost for that property would be twice the normal cost.
Thank you. I think I understand. I'm just flagging I'm not comfortable with that. That's probably something I won't be supporting, and primarily because I think it's a really slippery slope. There's actually a whole range of reasons that people have legitimate reasons for additional waste out there, and if we go down the track of doing that, I think that's really slippery. You know, you have the likes of people who have medical waste, for instance, that are currently required now to purchase additional waste receptacles, and those are individuals that need to do that because of their personal circumstances. And I think there's a whole range of legitimate reasons for not needing, for needing more than what we supply. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McGrath.
Just through the chair, a couple of questions. Can I get some clarification if there's a difference between a not-for-profit organisation and a charity? Are they registered differently? Is there a difference? Anyone?
I'd
Ask
say
Google.
Charities are required to be registered with the Charities Commission.
so. Red, how would you answer that? Because you'll be the
So we looked at what we can do to make this something we can help organisations that help the community with. We thought not-for-profits are often registered. There is a register, so that's what we basically wanted to go back to. Again, I guess there is slight flexibility in there, which could be reason for concern. So we basically aim to help the community with this, but for the sake of one extra receptacle, that could cause some tricky situations with queries. We were planning to check the register. I mean, that would be a simple way to count people in or out. When somebody really does something good for the community but is not registered, you would have that.
Discretion.
Thank you. Councillor Simpson.
Questions?
Oh, sorry.
Do we do things differently or the same with our recycling bins?
We've not had this request for our recycling bins.
Okay, but what if they're stolen or removed? Who's been paying?
There is a fee, but we have not charged the fee last year due to COVID, and we have also with the community housing that Napier has got, where the crates are taken away. The service has gone to a community housing specific approach. We've got 1,000 spare crates, about 1,200 spare crates from that coming back onto the stock.
Yeah, but there was still a cost. For me, I just think the two should be aligned very similar. And yeah, if I was going to talk about the $85, I just did note here in Mitre 10 they sell the wheelie bins for $149.
So you feel it's a reasonable cost?
Yeah.
Councillor Simpson, you finished, Rich?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. Sort of my concerns about a policy down this direction is the person paying for it is not necessarily the person who is offending. And $85, regardless of your deprivation levels, is still $85 that you plan to spend somewhere else. So my questioning is really around what action are we going to take if we identify that there are people who are offending in this process? In other words, if we find that there are recidivist people that are removing or damaging bins, what is our course of action? And secondly, my question is, so my bin has a chip in it. When it's recovered from somewhere else, am I going to get my $85 back?
Okay, there are quite a few items in there. Thank you. So the bins have chips and can be located, so that does happen. The wheelie bins are sometimes lifted at the same address that requests a replacement. We, as a council, own the bin, so the cost is on council for the replacement as such. So the customer should not be without a bin.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's not my question. My question is, if I've paid $85 to get a replacement bin, and the bin that was removed or stolen is later recovered, am I going to get my $85 back?
You hand the bin.
Well, that's something that we will need to consider. How many bins do we recover would also be an interesting question. At the point where we're hearing about chips being drilled out, makes it pretty difficult in some instances. But where the paper's really coming from is what's fair and reasonable. Is it fair that all of our community pay for bins that are lost and to replace those, or is it fair that people that have obviously damaged their own bins or not looked after them pay? So to me, that's really what it comes back to, and that's where we're looking for some direction.
The technology will allow for that particular bin to be found, and I think it is not impossible then to organise a refund.
Yeah.
Because you've paid for the replacement, I understand the question now. Thank you.
Councillor Mawson.
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair, just along the same lines as Deputy Mayor Brosnan, I don't really agree with B. I think there'd be a lot of, seeing as we're going to charge them anyway for that service, there'd be a lot of local businesses that may very well benefit from that money. So yeah, that's my view on that, B.
Thank you. Councillor Tapani.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Rhett. It would seem to me there are a number of opportunities for us to bolster this paper a little bit, and like our earlier paper, we're double debating, so I'd like the opportunity for a little bit more information to be inserted into this paper so that we can really consider the impacts, and particularly around that flexibility for staff to address situations as they arise, and a better understanding of how that technology will help us to identify the asset, who it belongs to, when it's returned to us, and how we can find a balance in the system. So that's my preference.
You
I'd
want
just
to
like
put a
to
motion forward along those lines?
that we put this let this lie on the table.
I would quite like to consider a C, and it's just affirming what Deputy Mayor Brosnan said.
So we just deal with Councillor Tapani first.
Well, I thought we were just answering questions. I didn't realise we were into the debate.
So thank you, Mr. Chair. So I would like to know whether or not that would be I think it's a practical solution. So I'm looking for a seconder around letting this motion lay on the table and come back to us.
With what?
I think there are opportunities for us to get a better understanding of how our staff will be provisioned to be able to flow through a process that enables them to assess these situations on a case-by-case scenario so that they can provide solutions rather than punitive processes. Secondly, there appears to be an area where the movement of these assets are trackable. And so how does that work out in practicality? And how are our staff able to provide and identify when a stolen or damaged item is found, how do we find balance in that? And so I think I'd like to create an opportunity for our staff to invest some time in building some processes that support them in this space, because there is some confusion.
So do we have a seconder for vision? Seconder?
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Does that preclude us from continuing to ask questions at this point?
So the new motion will be open up again. Let's put a motion that it be tabled.
Oh no. So, okay. So if RP's motion goes ahead, does that mean that we can't ask any more questions today?
We'll speak on that motion. You can question on that motion.
You can
When the
ask
motion's
questions
there,
now.
you can question it.
Oh, so okay.
Yeah.
So that's just a foreshadow motion, is that what we're saying? And I can continue to ask questions now. Okay, got you.
So we've got a seconder to it, so we can speak on it now, on that motion.
I think we still need to stay open for further questions.
Yeah, for the
because
questions
there's
on the
councillors
previous
that
one.
still
Okay.
have, well,
Yep.
yeah, just on the paper in general. Yeah.
Okay.
Cool. Thank you. I'll ask that one.
Hayley.
Okay.
this might be quite an ignorant question, but I was interested in what sort of charities or non-profit organisations have you had approach you that are in a residential space that are looking for these bins? Because I was just sort of struggling to bring to mind some examples.
An example is an organisation that has assisted living, so it's people caring for I think they may be mentally handicapped people, and they live in that unit with 7 or 8 and a carer. So those are the kind of scenarios where it's a normal residential property, yet there's not a normal family situation.
Okay.
Any other questions? So I'll now put Councillor Tuppenny's motion
What is it?
forward. And it's tabled.
Lies on the table. Are there any conditions around that in order to?
I think Councillor Tuppenny outlined that
Can you just put it up so we can see what it is we're voting on?
I haven't got it all written down yet. And
We'll get into it as we speak to it, sure.
probably need to get
So I'm not a wordsmith, Mr. Chair,
You just give them a rundown of what you...
but essentially what I'm looking for is an opportunity to leave this paper to lie on the table, to enable our staff to put some more information and data into the paper, and then bring it back to council. I'm not sure how you would word that, but that's the intention of the motion.
that lie on the table and
I don't want to put words into it, but you were asking questions relative to the discretion that they have, and whether that needs to be included in that motion.
Thank you.
Did you mention realigning with the recycling, or did you not? I'm just wondering, did you mention realigning with the recycling bins and crates?
I'm hopeful that the number of suggestions will be reflected in the revised paper coming forward.
Okay.
Can I ask a question in the sense of, is there a feeling that it should be accompanied by a policy to start with? Because, there are many scenarios, of course, so it's almost like a framework for how you manage these replacement bins. I think new builds are really straightforward, but the replacements, require quite a lot of time and decision along the way. Some councils work with a time frame, but if somebody isn't home, there's no way you can report a missing bin or a stolen bin in 24 hours, and it's still not their fault. So, yeah.
I think what we've reached here, that there's a lot of uncomfort about the original motions, and from the discussion that we've taken place in questions, you've probably got an avenue that you could follow up to come back with an alternative to this paper. Is that's what?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
Sorry, through the chair though, just to, for the sake of the council officer, I think he's seeking direction on whether we would like a policy developed to guide staff on how they actually work through a process about whether bins will be replaced at our cost or one of our community members' costs.
So we would be looking at and when it comes back, a policy involved, is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Yeah.
So,
That's the question being asked.
So am I going to put here to enable staff to develop a policy and provide more information, or just leave it as it is? Going to put a policy somewhere in here?
I think that was what Councillor Taylor was asking. Are there any other aspects of this that we need to clarify, such as policy development, discretion of staff and their ability to assess on a case-by-case basis? That was it, really. Those are the two things.
Well, through you, Mr. Chair, if we put this motion that we just lay this on the table and that the staff bring back a policy for us to consider relevant to the replacement of wheelie bins.
And can I say that it should also be extended to recycling bins? If we're doing it for one, we should do it for the other.
Yep, second that.
Could we could feed our questions back to the office?
So through the chair, we've had something come about recycling bins.
But we could incorporate that into the policy.
Yeah, no, 100%.
What the Mayor's saying, we should align it. If there's one there, well, that's what we use as a guide.
I just think, speaking in support of this, that's good. I just want to, I hope that it will highlight the discretion that is available so that it's not absolutely set in concrete. In all instances, this will be charged. So if the officers could come back perhaps with some even little examples of where that discretion would be appropriate and how they might administer it.
I really appreciate everybody's feedback because for us it's often a pretty tough call to make. I think it might even at some stage when there's a scenario be somebody else outside of our team getting involved in that decision for a particular situation. So take on board the extra bin comments. We have really aimed to stick to our guns on that over time, also because there are a lot of external operators working in the wheelie bin space that we are not aiming to be in competition with. So yeah, I appreciate everybody's feedback. This may not have been the appropriate meeting for this kind of discussion, but I really appreciate it.
Just, excuse me, through the chair, there was one word that came up before we put the motion and so forth. There's one word that came up earlier on, and I think mentally handicapped was mentioned. It's now intellectual disability. Seeing as that's my portfolio, I just wanted to highlight that. Thank you.
I think that we should be conscious that we can contact Rhett about any of our views that have come up today.
That's what I was just going to say. Through the chair, Rhett, do you feel that you've received enough information from us today to guide you in that policy development?
I'm more than happy for any of the people at the table here to have a look at a draft before we do a next round. Yes, that'd be great. In fact,
workshop. Through the chair, I just wanted to confirm: will the policy first come to this committee? Will that be the procedure?
This committee.
Yeah, and so obviously there's another check and balance in that process also with the pre-agenda with our chair and our deputy chair as well. So just wanted to go read.
I just want to, is there other examples of other cities and how, obviously there's a lot of cities that have had wheelie bins for quite a long time and how they deal with the situation? Do you know?
Quite a few work with the reporting time. If you don't report it within so many hours, I know Christchurch works like that. It's obviously quite hard to feel as another council how much discretion is applied in situations, but we can probably find context to see how they manage it. I think the other thing I can do, because we do have statistics around the numbers being requested, where it sits in the budgeted cost, and if the problem financially is a big problem, or whether it's just that feel around what is fair around the bin.
Okay, so unless someone's really desperately needs another question, I think we've given a pretty clear view to Red how we feel, and that you can contact him to assist with the paper when it comes back to this meeting. Are you happy with the amendment, Councillor McGrath?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So no other questions. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried.
Thank you, Red.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for that.
Andrew. Item 6, Stormwater Compliance Monitoring Report. There you go, Andrew.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon, Andrew.
The purpose of this report, well, I guess a bit of background. Napier City Council hold about 84 resource consents for various activities which may impact on the environment. Those consents are issued by the Hawke's Bay Regional Council. These are primarily to do with stormwater and wastewater discharges, land use consents, water abstraction and various structures. So each of our consents have a number of conditions and they typically require monitoring, including looking at water quality and reporting. And that often takes the form of reporting in annual reports, where we will provide an assessment of our performance against each of the resource consent conditions. Upon receipt, the Hawke's Bay Regional Council will consider the information and then provide a compliance monitoring report grading the level of compliance that Napier has achieved. We have received 4 of these compliance monitoring reports, each relating to 4 of the major stormwater discharges consents. It's important to note one of these consents is jointly held with the Regional Council. That's the West Shore Tidal Gates, and each of those 4 reports relate to the 2019-2020 monitoring period. So that's 30 June to 1 July. So for the Central Business District stormwater discharge and the cross-country drain stormwater discharge, full compliance was gained. And for the West Shore Tidal Gates and Thames Tyne resource consents, we had low-risk non-compliance. I will note that on each of those 2, it was only 1 condition that was rated low-risk non-compliance, all the others were fully compliant. So the 2 conditions where the low-risk non-compliance was given in relation to the West Shore Tidal Gates was a incident where I believe a hydrocarbon sheen was observed in the estuary. I believe this came from a complaint. However, we are seeking clarification with the Hawke's Bay Regional Council around the circumstances of this grading, simply because I guess the commentary was a little bit, I guess, confused as to exactly where it originated from and what the cause was. So do note over that weekend there were a number of incidents in which both City Council and Regional Council staff responded to and contained the majority of any discharges there. So yeah, we are seeking some further clarification around that grading. In terms of the Thames Tyne discharge consent, the low risk non-compliance related to excuse me, the requirement for some information packs around stormwater management to be sent out with essentially building consents applications. So our team have worked through the process of that, and we're about 95% there to having it. It's just going through the process to make sure it's all in place, and we envisage that we will be compliant for this coming monitoring period. Of course, at the Regional Council's discretion. I will also comment there that we already do make assessments, well, we do provide information through resource consent and sort of our engineering approval process on stormwater quality and quantity. So I guess by another avenue we are already addressing part of this, this condition. Yeah, so I think that brings, that summarises those monitoring reports, and yeah, happy to receive questions.
Deputy Mayor Brosnan.
Thank you, Andy. And this is the first time I think we've received a report like this. And so just congratulations to John and your team. It's really good to have some visibility over this. One of my questions is around the emergency discharge situation that we find ourselves in every now and then. And I note from your summary there, we haven't received a grading of low risk non-compliance for any emergency discharges that we've done in the last year. And so my question is, why was that not non-compliant? And I suppose a secondary question to that is, are we looking at applying for any changes to our consent conditions that might allow that? In certain circumstances.
Through the chair, thanks for your question. In terms of emergency discharges, I guess you're referring to wastewater discharges to the stormwater network?
Correct.
Well, yes, in that monitoring period, I believe we contained most of the discharges to the, we were able to reroute the, configure the wastewater system so that we didn't have any overflows.
Okay.
So I would suspect in the next compliance monitoring report we receive, then those issues will crop up.
Because this is from June last year, so just the time period.
That's correct.
So just on to that second part of my question around foreshadowing the fact that every network needs to do these on occasion and that they are low risk and have low effect. Are we looking at solidifying our ability to do that on rare occasions through a condition review?
It's not something we have yet considered. I'm not sure how solid ground we would be. We'd need to do a lot of work in that space to allow a wastewater discharge to the stormwater and the sensitive networks they're discharging to. And I think a lot of it comes around sort of, ensuring we're controlling our systems the best we can. Obviously, with the
Thinking of the November
the
event.
November flooding event we had, I don't know whether any wastewater system would be able to contain any overflows. And so I do believe we applied under the I forget the section, emergency provisions of the Resource Management Act to allow that.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Do I have a mover for the officer's recommendation, please? Councillor Mawson, second Councillor Tapani.
Just good work and nice suit.
Councillor Tapani.
Thank you for that. This is a particularly closely watched activity by our community. So your efforts in this space are appreciated, and your reports being brought back to this council not only inform us, but are distributed to our community, who are very keen to see some positive change in this space. So kia kaha, and keep up the good work.
Okay, those in favour of the recommendation, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. We'll do item 7 and have an adjournment. So, Kath. Thank you.
Hello again. Right, so we're talking about the Three Waters reform program of work. So as we've talked about a little bit of that in our earlier session today, but I'll just go through briefly what we're trying to achieve and how much we've got to spend and where we're at and the risks. So as part of the Three Waters reform, there's a tranche 1 funding that's been allocated across all the TLAs in New Zealand. There was $761 million in the first tranche. I think there's 3 tranches, and I'm not sure, we don't know yet what the next 2 are going to be used for. Napier was very fortunate to have $12.51 million allocated to us. So last November, we had a short time frame to pull together a delivery plan for projects that were not in our annual plan or our LTP, and the expectation is that we deliver these by the end of March 2022. So it's quite a challenge, particularly when you have projects that haven't even been scoped and you're meant to start from day one and get them delivered. So we've got quite a lot of work to do. So in pulling together this program of work, I've had a few key themes around what we're trying to achieve. So while the first one is improved capacity and capability to accelerate our infrastructure projects. So by that I mean taking on additional resources to make sure that this very large Three Waters program that we've got coming up is scoped as quickly as we can so that we can just carry on with the work. And we can also look at how we bundle some of that work together, even regionally, to see how we can deliver, given that there are quite a few constraints on the industry at the moment. Preparing the team and local industry for the upcoming change in standards and the reform process. So that's looking at our basically upskilling and becoming more technologically advanced within our operations team, collecting more information and having people being used to working with these tools before they move into whatever may come next. improving safety and quality of drinking water by fast-tracking the delivery of low manganese water to reduce dirty water events and address the fire flow issues. So there's two major capital projects that we're working on as part of this. One of them is getting new bores into supply so we can reduce our reliance on high manganese bores to assist with our dirty water issues, and then also looking at upsizing a number of pipes to deal with potential fire flow issues in the future, and that's come out of the results of our water modelling and master plan. Improving community and Māori engagement, so we've got a cultural values assessment that we've started, and that's working with mana whenua groups to look at our waterways and produce a cultural values assessment for those, and also upskilling our Three Waters team to understand how to apply this values assessment into the work that we're doing. So that has kicked off and will take right until the end of the program in March 22. And then the final bit is upgrades to our Three Waters asset management system and maintenance management transformation program. So this is, we've got a year to get as advanced as possible in our asset management space. So we're looking at upgrading our asset management system. So we're going to software as a service. We have data collection programs underway. We're looking at the information that we already have and are doing a sanity check on that. And also starting to automate more of our operations and maintenance practices within our program Acela. So that's sort of where we're trying to make improvements over the next year. So currently we've spent just over 600,000. We've got a long way to go. I know it doesn't seem like a lot, but we are ramping up. So we're still scoping some of these projects, but rest assured that the biggest capital projects in here are well underway. So of the total 12.5, we had 8.45 for capital projects. We've got a fire flow project which is worth $2.5 million. That's well through its design, and we're starting to look at procurement to get people on the ground to start upsizing some of that pipe work. We've done the scope for our low manganese water project, and we're about to go out to the market to get technical advisors to assist with the technical work and outline design. And we're also moving on the wet boards that we talked about earlier, so understanding water quality within the network and starting to do more monitoring, and that fits in with our water safety plan as well. Te Awa structure plan you know about, we've got $1.5 million to boost that project. We're looking at monitoring on trade waste supplies, so we understand the quality of the trade waste that's coming out in volume, and we're also helping with Meani School to look at their water supply to make sure it's compliant and is safe drinking water for them. So that's the capital element. Then we've got a number of asset management improvement and planning projects at 3.5, and then we've got the collaborative projects, which is the cultural values assessment and some regional projects looking at how we can assist people with the private suppliers, really looking at how we can assist them. We need to understand how many there are out there and what they've currently got and what the journey for them might be under the Three Waters reform. So the biggest risk, obviously, is trying to complete this work within the period. And the way I've set this program up is we're not just doing one thing. So we've got people across a lot of different disciplines who will be involved in the program. And we've got capital works, we've got planning work, we've got asset management work, and we've got cultural work. So there's I've spread the risk as much as I can by having quite a wide variety of projects that all still feed into improving the way that we deliver our water services, improve our understanding around our assets and how we're performing, and is a good first step to lead into our master plan and going towards chlorine-free. So it's all feeding into that direction. So any questions?
Questions? Mr. Tapani.
One question, Kath, and it's more to do with stuff again on the fringe rather than the report itself. You've outlined a schedule of work, particularly over a number of years, and the Three Waters indications we're looking at significant change. Did we get any confidence from Taumata Arawai or central government around how we should commit ourselves to work over the next 3 years while this conversation continues to evolve?
Through the chair, that's a good question. We haven't had guidance directly from Te Matarawai, but we have had from Solgum. So generally the process that councils are taking across the country, which we are too, is to continue as if nothing's happening. So we've still got our program of work and we're just getting on with it because we don't know, what's going to happen in the future. So we're just moving forward with it.
Fantastic. And just a supplementary question, Mr. Chair. Did they provide any indications around how they might help us engage with our community around these significant changes coming forward?
Not that I'm aware of.
All up to us?
Yes.
At this stage.
Well, John's got something to say.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the DIA are undertaking quite a large piece of engagement themselves, primarily with local government entities, but also with Māori, and I think we all have seen part of that at some point, and we don't really have a lot of influence on the timeframes around that. Our opportunity to engage on this is through the long-term plan as we move forward. DIA have indicated that there will be no new entities come into force until such a time as we've probably finalised our next long-term plan. So it really is, for the next 3 years, carry on.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No further questions.
Okay, the Mayor's moving this motion. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Crown. Would you like to speak?
I will, thank you. Thank you, Kath. That's really good to have an update on our Three Waters reform program. And I guess talking just about the larger process around Three Waters reform, obviously there's still a number of unknown with regards to what these are going to look like, and a number of questions such as who will collect the revenue, what will the governance look like, how will projects be prioritised within a multi-region, who will own the assets. There's some pretty big questions in there, so it's absolutely vital that we closely track the progress of not only the reform funding projects, but all of our water projects, so that we are really well positioned as the Three Waters reform progresses to protect the interests of our community and the future investment in our water infrastructure.
Councillor Crown, no other speakers? All those in favour of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Do I have a mover for an adjournment of 15 minutes? Councillor Tapani.
Excuse me, do you want to move?
Try now.
Let's leave it in June so we can back into 2 weeks.
Have you got public
It's open.
Yes, but that's a new meeting.
No, rather than go in and out, we'll go into, sorry. You moved that we go into have an adjournment of 15 minutes.
Yep.
Seconded by Councillor Bogue. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. There's some food out in the room.
Oh.